Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Cyber Security Live ANZ Series 1, the first series of this lead of events. I'm Isaac, and I'll be introducing everyone for this morning for you all. I really appreciate everyone jumping on the event this morning to listen to our fantastic lineup of speakers that we've got for you today. It's going to be a really great morning, and I can't wait for you all to take notes and take the information that you get from these guys today and take it back into your organizations and just get some learnings out of everything. So I'm part of the organising committee at IQPC Australia and would firstly like to take this opportunity to thank our stellar speakers across Australia and New Zealand and our event partners Darktrace, Sophos, Fortinet and Okta for supporting and making this initiative possible this morning. I think when we look back at 2020, high-profile security breaches and COVID have kept the cyber community busy in crisis management mode through the majority of 2020. And that said, the year has seen leadership teams learn many new lessons and as a result, driven changes to the cybersecurity strategy, investments and processes heading into 2021 to offset the skill shortages, tighten budgets and an enlarging threat per meter that organizations continue being exposed to. So I do have some quick housekeeping announcements I'd like to run you through before we get things underway. So throughout each presentation, you'll have the opportunity to submit questions for our speakers to answer live at the end. So you can do this using the Q&A box that's on the dock at the bottom of your screen. I encourage you to ask as many questions as you can for our speakers, and they'll endeavour to respond to them and get the questions to you, and they can also do this offline post-presentation as well. I'd also like to remind you that you'll get access to on-demand recordings post the session. There's also a resource centre filled with white papers and information and links to our partners' websites as well, and have been made available around to help you build knowledge on cybersecurity practices. I definitely encourage you to check those guys out. The links are in there as well for their websites. And lastly, if you have any technical issues throughout the sessions, please submit your inquiry within the Q&A box or in our support system, and we'll endeavour to respond to you as quick as we possibly can. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. So the first panel for today is our Cyber Execs panel. It's planning, building and transforming for a future-proof cybersecurity capability. And we are joined by Mark Rogers, who's the VP of Cybersecurity Strategy at Okta, Asaf Ahmad, Chief Information Security Officer at Fire and Rescue New South Wales, Bram Broderick, Head of Information Security Strategy at Transgrid, Matthew Lang, Head of Cybersecurity Strategy, Architecture and Delivery at Ozpost, and Ashish Rajan, who is the Head of Security and Compliance at PageUp. So Mark, Asaf, Matthew, Ashish and Bram, I will hand it over to you guys to kick off the morning. I can't wait to hear what you guys all have to say.
Thank you for that kind introduction. And well, this is probably one of my first times on the other side of the seat. Normally I'm the guy getting the questions thrown at me rather than facilitating them out. So hopefully I won't go too crazy. Well, first of all, can I allow my panelists to introduce themselves? Asaf, do you want to start?
Yes, good morning, everybody. Yes, my name is Asaf Ahmed. I am the CISO at Fire and Rescue New South Wales. My job is, as a CISO, is to look at cybersecurity from all angles, top, down, bottom up, and sideways across. And you will be amazed. Like we all know that not a single day passes when something new comes up, and we got. And we have to manage that with whatever time and resources we have. So very interesting for career to be in.
Bram?
Thanks, Mark. Morning, all. My name is Bram Broderick. I am the head of security strategy at Transgrid. Transgrid is the owner and operator of the high voltage transmission lines in New South Wales and ACT. So essentially, if we didn't exist, you wouldn't have had this webcast today. Pretty much play in the critical infrastructure space, and it's an exciting place to be right now, especially with some of the legislative changes that are coming up. It's also a very interesting place to be, especially when you look at compliance versus security, because you can be compliant and not secure, but usually you could be secure and compliant. So yeah, that's another discussion for another time.
Matthew.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks, Mark. Look, Matt Lang, look after strategy and architecture and the cyber program generally at Australia Post. So something we've been building over the last sort of 7 years, which has been quite a fun journey, quite a ride. Lots of challenges in our business, and obviously lots of challenges over the last sort of 12 months or so. We're particularly we're anticipating the new critical infrastructure legislation as well, so that could mean some positive changes for us, we hope. But we've got a few questions out there for the feds to answer. But yeah, really great to be here, and appreciate everyone for joining.
And Ashish.
Being in this panel has been really amazing. So thank you for having me. My name is Ashish. I am the head of security and compliance for a company called PageUp. To give you a reference of where you would see PageUp, it's a talent management software. Every time you apply for a job in any of the big banks or most of the companies in Australia, the pop-up that comes in when you have to fill out your application form is usually PageUp. So like 9 or 10 times is usually PageUp. I'll just say that it's that common. And that's my 9 to 5. Outside my 9 to 5, I am the host of a weekly video podcast called Cloud Security Podcast. And I'm also a senior trainer for an academy called the Cloud Security Academy. So if outside of my 9 to 5, I love teaching cybersecurity, cloud security as well. I was used to be a tutor in RMIT, which is a university in Melbourne for people who may not be aware, I think. But that's kind of me. And this is what I do for fun, I guess.
So I'm Mark Rogers. I'm the VP of Cybersecurity Strategy at Okta, a digital identity and security company. We aim to keep your access to infrastructure, applications, everything else secure, and look towards the future of all of that. My role in Okta is more around breaking things and talking about breaking things. So I'm kind of a security spokesperson. I'm also a security researcher, and I'm the co-founder of the CTI League, a not-for-profit group of people, about 1,500 people in 80 countries, protecting healthcare during the pandemic. So this has been a incredibly busy year for me, obviously. And this is a great panel to have such a diverse group of people. I kind of wonder at the questions I've been given a little bit, because I'm not sure we've got time to answer all of them. The first question is the doozy. It's, what challenges do you anticipate in your threatscape over the next 5 years? I mean, wow. Okay. Who wants to dive in?
I was going to say, should we call the crystal ball, or what are we going to start with, I guess, because that's what we might need for this. I'm happy to kind of give it a shot, and I'll let everyone else follow. That's okay?
Yeah.
Sweet. So from a challenge perspective, so my current company is a SaaS technology company. And some of the things that I've noticed, and this is across the board as well, where we're, as a security team, we've kind of been obviously had the challenge of having the whole remote workforce migration early half of last year. And somehow we kind of feel like we've kind of got some grip over it. It's a bit weird in Melbourne versus Sydney, like, because we have offices all over. Some of the challenges that I feel is the lack of control or the feeling of lack of control, I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to say, where having someone in your office or in your perimeter was like the quote unquote, the safety net that we used to have as security folk, that, okay, I know there are certain dark corners of the office or of the servers that I don't talk about, but as long as they're deep within these networks, it shouldn't really matter. So what remote working has done is kind of has forced a lot of companies to consider, what does this look like in a remote world where I have to open up that dark room to the internet because my employees cannot come into the office anymore? That's challenge number one that I see growing for myself and my colleagues in I guess, moving forward. But I think it's really interesting, and maybe my statement on this is a bit biased because being a technology company, we've kind of always been able to be remote working. So I feel my challenges are a lot less than compared to some of the other people who would have always had, I guess, the on-premise kind of world, where coming from a cloud world is just a matter of having the right control. That's challenge number one. Challenge number two, I've got a whole list. I can keep going. The challenge number two that I've been seeing a lot of my colleagues and myself face is the world is primarily moving towards the whole web and API world. And a lot of the monolith that a lot of companies carry. So PageUp is a 20-plus-year-old company. We have all sides of software that we've carried on so far. We've done a great job of keeping it mature enough, but at the same time, it's been challenging as well to have a world of serverless, then have multiple cloud environments, and having API microservices, and having a data center, and so the breadth of technologies as security teams that we would have to deal with moving forward as we go more remote. I think those are two big challenges that I see for myself and at least the colleagues that I speak to.
And for me, it's also not just the breadth of challenges; it's the breadth of attacks that we're seeing. Bram, you're in charge of, arguably an incredibly critical piece of infrastructure. What are the challenges that you are seeing coming down the line, and what's keeping you awake at night?
So I think for us the challenges remain the same, but we do have other things to consider from a adversary perspective, right? So the people that would really keep me awake are those advanced persistent threat type of organizations, those people that have the funding, that have the patience and the time to dig themselves in and stay in there. At the same time, as an organization or as a cyber component within the organization, we need to enable business to be able to do better business, have better telemetry information to do better forecasting. Cloud is a very, very big item on everybody's radar, less of an item on our radar to date, but becoming more and more of an item. And all of your traditional controls that you have built around that is not something that's really suited for this. I don't want to call it a new world because it's been around for ages, but at least for us, it's a relatively new world. Managing identities, the whole thing of tromboning or hempening, whatever you want to call it, where everybody comes to one central point and then goes out. You can no longer sustainably do that. So for us, the big thing would be how do we enable our business to do better business in a secure fashion? Don't even want to talk about renewables and all of those other types of things that's coming and new people connecting to the grid. There's numerous different types of challenges, even in the physical space.
No, it makes perfect sense. I mean, from my perspective, watching things unfold like the recent cyber attack in Florida, it's reinforcement of what some of us have been saying for about 10 years now. But the fact that we're here and it's actually happening kind of puts a whole new urgency onto a lot of the things that we need to start organizing and getting sorted out. Asaf, what's your take on all this?
Yeah, this is the key question is cybersecurity, what's happening at the top and what's happening at the bottom. So if you look at the top, it's more of resilience and it's becoming a compliance issue. And if you look at the services sector, then it is of digital trust. Fire and rescue being a very operational company, we've got about 90% of people are firefighters and about just less than 5% are the admin people who normally sit and work. What we are seeing is the opening of the perimeter, the smart tools at the endpoints, the cloud hosted apps is making our endpoint a very critical component of the whole network. the more and more access we want to give, the more open we want to be, we want to become, and give a very user experience, a good user experience at the endpoint. We need to. My most critical item is the endpoint, and I need complete visibility of all my endpoints, which are acting or active from outside, or people can connect to. So visibility and security right at the endpoint is very key. Others challenges like third-party supply chain connecting, and the home network is becoming a part of the corporate network. So there's a lot of IoT in the home, and you just don't know what's going to happen there. So endpoint and visibility is really quite key for us, I think. Yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, also over here in the US, we've seen organizations like yours, Matthew, become a major target. Do you envision some of these challenges hitting you guys? Are you changing the way you're doing anything?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the two that sort of stand out for us is, I guess, we look at the situation here in Australia, geopolitically and economically with China, and that relationship's deteriorating. And we had the Prime Minister come on the telly last September, I think it was, talking about the copy-paste advisory and some quite a persistent and aggressive sort of nation-state activity. And I think that with these sorts of a change in government in the US is going to impact those, will put some strain on some of that politics, and I think that could create some sort of blowback into Australia. So that's one thing we're sort of monitoring and trying to look at the different threat vectors that are known to sort of hurt us there. And then you add in, a big long legacy tail that our business has. I think, the other thing is the ransomware. So, our business is all about operations and uptime. So we have a very extensive infrastructure, very extensive set of physical locations around the entire continent, and the bulk of our revenue comes from those operations. So the impact of ransomware spreading through our environments could be catastrophic. So I guess what we're a little concerned about, and we're definitely been adapting to for quite some time now, is I guess the advancement in tradecraft of the financially motivated actors, and they're starting to get that stealthy APT style approaches from the nation states, and they're bringing it in with a financial motivator. So I think Microsoft coined it the human operated malware. So that lateral movement with your environment that's scoping you out. So needless to say, we're looking at things like Essential 8 and broader top 37 controls from the Australian government, and isolation, segmentation. We agree. Endpoint visibility is massive, so we've got an extensive EDR rollout that's almost complete, which has been invaluable during COVID as well. So that's the other threat we agree with, is the endpoints in the hostile work environments. Is everyone patching things? Is there DNS poisoning going on? Is there other man-in-the-middle compromises there? So, it's good old cyber, isn't it? You sort of start to get a handle on something in the world, or cyber throws something back at you, and now you need to do everything again. But they're probably the two major threat actor groups that we're concerned about. But we've also got, naturally residual sort of insider threat concerns as well, right? Being such an extensive operational network as well, and the impact being so potentially so great. So, keeping us all busy.
Yeah, I mean, this year has definitely been my busiest for sure. Actually, I mean, you hit on a really interesting point there about the change in the way the threat actors are carrying things out now. It's almost like an industrialization of the techniques used. When you break down some of the most sophisticated attacks, like take, for example, SolarWinds, the individual components weren't that scary or unknown. There's no major 0 days at play here. It was just perfectly executed lateral movement inside organizations using tried and tested techniques that they knew they were going to succeed at. And for us, that means you can't afford to slip up even once, because they'll get their foot in the door. And once they've got their foot in the door, they'll go on. But at the same time, as you mentioned, there's an economy growing around this. We saw with the Twitter hacks that bad guys are breaking in, hijacking identities and accounts, and then selling them. And so the group that gets their foot in the door and the group that ultimately exploits you and tries to leverage that to monetize it may be completely different. And that's going to make attribution just one hell of a big mess. I mean, not that it isn't already. Everything is changing in the way we work. Pandemic has forced most of our workers into a remote scenario. We've got VPNs everywhere. The traditional kind of castle and moat approach of security is really not a thing these days. You can't access your infrastructure if it's sitting in a building that no one can go into. How are all of your organizations changing to cope with this new way of working? And what are you doing to change processes to improve the way that you're going to address productivity going forward? I don't know who wants to go first.
I'll let someone else go first this time. I went first.
I'm happy to. Look, yeah, big challenge. We've probably been on the cloud journey longer than most sort of large Australian enterprises. Luckily, that was, I think, predominantly due to sort of a lack of regulation, to be honest, that allowed us to move into that space earlier. It doesn't mean that we've fully got a handle on that, but it means that it certainly meant with COVID that a lot of the things that you needed to be in place and in the cloud were there when it hit. But we still have reliance on VPNs for legacy applications sitting in data centers and things like that. So there was, I guess, there was a big pivot there. We're making there's a lot of fancy security tooling that I think ultimately will be useful and that we will pick up over time. But it comes down to basics, right? So it comes down to how are you delivering the applications? What's your approach to deliver those? And when you deliver those, the applications and the data, where does it land? Does it land on a legacy Windows, 64-bit app, or does it land onto a modern application sitting in a sandbox, making use of the mobile aspects of those operating systems? And then you can start to apply your DLP policies and strong encryption around those containers and these sorts of things. So we're making a lot of sort of headwinds into, I guess, unifying endpoint management under UEM style technologies and trying to take a mobility mindset of app and data delivery to any endpoint, and it could be BYOD, which is another point. How many organizations have got more BYOD than they've ever had before because of COVID? I know we do. So basics like that, which are big undertakings, and they do require you to modernize the apps you're running and modernize the way you deliver them as well. So I think the ZTNA technology that a lot of vendors have got is a good sort of middle ground. I think you can get people away from an exposed VPN. I mean, here's the other one. What's the denial of service risk on your VPN when you've got all these users hanging off it, and then someone decides to target that? What does that do to your business? So moving away from those sort of inbound listening services on the internet onto these cloud-based services, I think will give you the scale to mitigate that risk as well. So I think just delivering, getting your gateway hosting, API gateway hosting right, things like that as well, and then all stitched up with identity. It's almost like I'm plugging your employer there, Mark, but identity does hang the cloud together, doesn't it? It's the sort of it's all underpinning, whether it's an API or a web UI that's being served to these applications. So Yeah, lots of challenges. We're not there yet, but I think that's at the heart and soul of it.
To be brutally honest, I don't think anyone is completely there yet, because everyone has legacy infrastructure, and there's no way an organization can just flick a switch and instantly move to a completely cloud organization. Even some of those organizations born in the clouds have enough technical debt that they still have some legacy issues to support, whether it's through integrations or supplier connections or other things. So it's absolutely true. I think zero trust is a very promising future, but it's going to take some time for us to get there, and we have to be cognizant of the effort that it's going to take many organizations to migrate.
Waiting for you to say zero trust. I'm not surprised. I'm surprised it took you that long to say it.
You said it.
You'll play bingo.
Yeah, and I was like, I'm just waiting. I was just like, I wish I started a bet before we started this. How long would it take before Mark says zero trust? Oh, I mean, I can totally go next, and I love the idea behind zero trust, and I agree with you that from a technology perspective, we're not there. So some of the challenges that probably we see from us. So we always had, to your point about the VPN thing, we always had that, but that was almost like, oh, if it was like disaster recovery scenario, we'll go down the VPN path, because primarily people loved going to the office. But now, I guess to quote what Matthew said, a VPN being done as a service, suddenly no one has access, and we're not really essential service, I guess, to go into the organization. And would you want to put the risk of probably infecting your staff and by asking them to go into office and doing all this? So we definitely are. So that's one of the challenges that I see for sure. And I think we're already doing some work in what does it look like if we didn't have the office? Like that, we kind of start thinking from that perspective. Like we're primarily in cloud, and this is kind of where the whole zero trust kind of conversation. Like I've been having that in my organization for some time, but not from a perspective that I need to buy these tools, but more from a perspective of what does it mean for us, say, when Ashish logs in from San Francisco versus 5 seconds later he's logging in from, I don't know, Australia somewhere. And those kind of nuances, which are like continuous authentication, continuous authorization, is what zero trust meant for me. And that's my dog in the background if you guys can hear him. But it's for me, zero trust, the way it stands at the moment for me has been more around identity, continuous integration, continuous authentication, continuous authorization, and just having integration across the board for all my identities. So I'm not worried about Ashish seemed to have access to these 5 machines yesterday, but he's got this extra 6th app. I don't know what that is. Like, I don't want to be in that situation. So it's one blanket rule for everyone. Everything's a single sign-on. But even to get there took some time. So I feel like those conversations were easier when people were around me, and we were like being able to drop into random conversations. The remote working and not being in the office, I think the one thing that I feel people may lose on is the fact that when someone around in the office just comes around and talk, hey, this server's been lying around for some time. What should we do with it? As a security person, all of us would just turn around. Maybe you should talk to us first before we just simply switch it off or do something else with it. And I feel like a lot of those challenges would just go under the radar and would never be known. So that's the second challenge that I see. And I guess coping with it is, I guess the answer is I'm still looking for what the perfect way to do this is. A lot more easier when you're in the office, you can talk to people. But when you're doing this remotely in my little old laptop and hoping that people would keep me informed and security would be on the top of their mind. So the way I go about this is by making myself known in all the virtual events that the company is running. So they still have this, oh yeah, Ashish, the security guy. And so it's almost like I'm kind of trying to use the marketing way of solving my challenge by making sure that I'm, I guess, at least not top of mind, but at least visible enough that people actually know. Because we've hired people as well. Like, it'll be hard to say that since the COVID has started, yes, everyone's done a security awareness training. Yes, everyone's tried to do the right security best practices, but who should they go to, and who's ongoingly in front of them to say, someone for security? I think that's kind of the approach that I've taken. I don't know if this is what everyone else did, but those are some of the 2 things that I've been looking at.
Makes sense. Brahm, you must be seeing kind of a big change in terms of productivity, given the fact that everyone's now scattered to the winds instead of being clustered in the way that they're used to. Is that changing the way you guys are dealing with stuff in terms of work? Is it impacting the way you handle security?
The short answer is yes. It is impacting, but so bear in mind, as essential services, we do still have a workforce that have to have boots on the ground, even during the height of the pandemic, because there has to be someone that is physically maintaining or fixing or working on the infrastructure. I mentioned earlier, physical security is a key component. So for us, we had to revisit some of the physical security practices, especially when you may have a location that used to have a large flow of heat going through there that might not have that anymore. There are security controls associated with it. I don't want to go into the physical component. From a workforce perspective, in terms of working from home, there hasn't been that much change in general. I think we were already fairly set up towards that. I think the biggest thing for us has been around things like the tromboning that I mentioned. So having a single entry or egress gate, that's not going to work anymore. And we had to find better ways of working with that workforce that need access to certain cloud services, limited ones that we do have. But we can certainly see that growing as cloud adoption gets bigger. I saw a question there around the use of user experience monitoring. So I assume that's more user behavior analytics. I just want to say, bear in mind, there is no silver bullet when it comes to security. No matter what a vendor sells you, it's not just you plugging something in. We have been working through those type of activities where we actually identify what normal looks like, and when do we suddenly see someone doing something that is different from normal. But to get to a point where it starts being of value takes a tremendous amount of work. There are a lot of log sources that you need to work through. You need to actually identify what is relevant data. Had to do assessment type of activities, have your use cases and say, are we going to pick up these type of things? Let's simulate that type of attack, see whether that happens, and then bring that back into the other side. So concept of purple teaming that people might be familiar with, whatnot. So
that makes sense. Asaf, do you have anything to add to this?
Yes, so I like that the ultimate, the end of the journey is, yes, zero trust, and finally the word got used, and the other one is the behavioral analytics. I really like that because when you look at a SIEM solution, it's normally collecting so much information and then you're looking for a needle. Now, if you can do a kind of a behavioral analytics and you can see where the privileges are getting enhanced or managed or changed or misused, you can really detect very quickly what's happening. So yes, the pre-COVID, we were pretty okay. We had VPNs and we were trying to enforce endpoint policy. It was a mess and it was not working. And then we were trying to tell people second factor is good, it will be do this, it will help us, especially in your credential compromise and whatever happens at the endpoint with the ransomware attacks. If you have second factor, you can eliminate that. So all that was, we're trying to sell, force, market, but suddenly COVID happened and we really were very, it helped us implement the second factor bit. And then the endpoint and what is the, how do we secure the endpoint when it is coming from anywhere? We then developed our whole architecture roadmap and we found that, yes, we got to reach zero trust. And for that, we need to have a very good endpoint detection and prevention control software, which we then got CrowdStrike in, and we are now looking at how to implement, go on to the zero trust roadmap, and we're looking at a few technologies. Netscope is one of them, and a couple of others, and that really will help us basically control the endpoints together with user analytics and CASB. There's another term which people should use now. Will really and when you're using SharePoint in the cloud and everything, you can really you can control DLP. Without a DLP tool, you can be there at 99%. So that the kind of things we are looking at currently. Yes.
So we've got about 4 minutes left. I'm just looking through the questions the audience has asked. There's one I see about whether or not Australian regulators are lagging behind. As a Brit living in America, I'm going to stay well away from that one. The one that does nicely dovetail into what we've been talking about, though, is about data loss prevention and how whether or not any of you are doing something special to protect sensitive data, given the unusual terms. And this actually ties into a question I've been asking other organizations, which is, does your security now literally boil down to a 5-year-old Wi-Fi access point in somebody's house? Are any of you taking special steps to protect sensitive data right now?
But I'm going to let someone else answer first because there's a lot of nod. I don't want to jump the gun here, so I'll let someone else answer first.
We actually don't have a lot of sensitive data, but still personal and a little bit of medical data. And for that, we are currently implementing a very what do you call the New South Wales Information Classification Guidelines, and we use a record management software where all records, the sensitive information is saved there. It is currently doing what we need as per our requirements, but yes, we need to go to the next layer where we will see how Microsoft will give us some classification functionality in SharePoint, and then so that once that happens, we will extend it to SharePoint, and then CASB will be able to give us the DLP solution we need. So for us, that should be enough as far as I know now. I don't know about what happens in the future if we get some more sensitive information. Yeah.
Yeah, we've sort of started. DLP is one of the ones that sort of make one of those sort of subdomains that make the hair on the back of my neck stand up, and it's probably the least. I mean, obviously, security analytics and monitoring is pretty tough, but trying to say that piece of data that's leaving the organization was the thing that you should actively stop in flow and annoy the business by doing so is quite hard. I mean, tagging's imperfect. Tagging's done by humans. The mechanisms that I'm across, sure, you can look for PAN, you can look for addresses, you can look for dates of birth with regexes and things. But when you start to sort of say, well, that PowerPoint that went out, was that sensitive? Should it have been stopped? That's where it gets really hard, and it takes a whole of business problem. We sort of tried to turn it on its head a little bit and say, all right, well, let's get back to need to know, right? So if a certain manager's jumping up and down because something left the business, and they know that was a thing that should not leave the business, and their business unit knows that, okay, well, how about you put it in this special repository we've built for you? So we've effectively wrapped up a bunch of basically just good hygiene, really just applying our information standards against it, which, are based on ISO 27000 and things, and just applying rigor around your IAM, your auditing, your accounting, these sorts of things. Applying tagging, applying encryption when objects leave the repository. And then there's some training around that, so for the custodians or the content managers of those sites. So it's quite amazing when you go out to your business and talk to them all and say, what is it that you need to protect? You will find them. There's obvious stuff, and then there's stuff that's in the grey area between the obvious things and perhaps things are a bit more benign. So yeah, we've taken that step a few years back, and we're looking to sort of grow that. The other one is So that's all about need to know, right? If you don't need to know, then you won't have access to this repository. You won't be able to get your hands on it and, you know, take it for whatever your motivation is. I'd like to extend that to all of our repositories, right? So I sort of talk about OneDrive and Office 365 as this expanding universe of ACEs. And, you know, how can you try and sort of shrink that expanding universe or try to normalize it some way? So I've got some particular interest in access governance around, you know, unstructured data. Yeah, and I guess, you know, just good hygiene around your sort of structured data as well. So we're using Google's GCP DLP APIs to identify some of the more sort of the easier to find sensitive data sets, and then ensure that we're putting those data sets into the right you know, policies and whatnot. So yeah, a few different ways. I think obviously DLP, the CASB, UEBA technology has a role to play, but it also adds a lot of cost to your business. So is that the first thing you should do? Or should you perhaps take an approach that we've taken? I don't know, maybe we're wrong, but it kind of felt like a sensible step that we could take without sort of adding a massive amount of cost to our business for data loss protection.
Yep, sounds like a great approach. I think we've run out of time now. I'm hearing from the organisers that they want us to wrap up. So thanks, everyone. Like, it's been a really interesting panel. I kind of wish we had an hour and maybe a bottle of beer to chat about
Probably
this.
a whole day for this. You could just
Yeah, right.
zero trust, user behavior analysis. You could just go and keep going.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone.
Right.
Really good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Isaac, over to you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us on that and speaking. It was very insightful, and we really appreciate having you all on to talk about your insights. It was fantastic. I'll just let everyone know that in order to get into the next session with Jared Pergonis from Darktrace, we will need to jump out of this one and go into the next one in your timeline. So we'll see you there. The session will start in 3 minutes. So we'll see you there. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thank you.